embarrassed.
We're good. We're done. We're off now. But you could. No, I'm kidding.
I wanted to listen to them. We flew in special for this, and we're really embarrassed. So
no, don't be embarrassed.
So sorry.
Well, welcome to Cara.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Nice to see you. No, it's such a joy. We started off the night, by the way, with my daughter singing Loud Mouse.
No.
She's over there waving.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, hi.
Anyway, so she gave a special performance to welcome you, but you weren't here. But it's fine. Anyway, maybe there'll be an encore.
We can do it together later.
So tell everybody about Loud Mouse and how it came to be between the two of you.
We told each other in the car we would just take a breath.
It's all
I'm feeling extremely
Everybody
stressed.
had fun. Did we have fun? Clap if you had fun. Yeah.
We didn't want to interrupt the flow when we got here, and clearly we are.
We were the opening act, and now.
Yes,
Yeah.
we're good. We're good.
No, I'm kidding. It was supposed to be everybody. It's fine. It's all good.
Hi, everyone. So this is my sister, Cara, and I called her up one day and said, I have an idea for a children's book, and it should be about me.
Shocking.
No, I said, I'm not really sure. I know it should be about an experience that I had when I was little. And I said, I'm not really sure how to write it. It should be something about my experience when I was younger. And I knew deep down that I had something really special, but I kind of wanted to hide it all the time. I wasn't sure how much space to take up with it. And you know, like Cara often says, that feeling of you really want people to notice and see you, but also the fear of actually being seen and what that scrutiny, what that does to you. So I called her because honestly, she's the teacher, the elementary school teacher, and the beautiful writer, and I'm just like the idea, give you the kitchen sink, now go make me sound coherent and articulate. And so I called her up and she started doing her thing.
No pressure, by the way. And she calls and says, here, make it beautiful.
I'll let her speak. We do have a thing where I am the older sister, so I tend to speak over her and boss her around a lot. But what was I going to say? Oh, because she's also a literacy. Do you call it, like, you do literacies?
I'm a reading teacher, literacy specialist. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I do literacy, which means I read and write.
No, you help the children and you understand language in a way that children would really understand, and how much to challenge them in a children's book, and how much will go over their heads, and how much to you tell them about that.
Well, I always aim high. I always think sophisticated children's books are the best. And I like if there's a clear thread, but then there's all these opportunities for parents and teachers and kids to dive deep, the more they read the book. And of course, with children's books, they read them repeatedly. So the goal was to find a way to capture this kind of tricky idea of wanting to be seen and heard, to embody the best of yourself and be bright, but then also knowing that that's tricky business, that it's a risk, and that it means you are then very seen and very heard. Excuse me, my voice is a little, I'm losing my voice a little bit.
Which is hysterical, or not hysterical, because the whole book is about finding your voice. And so I tell her it's psychosomatic, because we have to go, and I'm sorry I'm putting all your stuff out there, but
totally
I'm like,
fine.
Great. I'm like, now you're losing your voice because you have to be on a stage with your sister, who always has the big voice, and now she has to find her voice, and now she's losing it.
And because we're late, I'm going to tell you the truth of it, which is that about a month before we started the book tour, for Loud Mouse, how a little mouse finds her big voice, I started to get this weird thing happening with my voice, and of course my sister has all these vocal specialists, and I went to a specialist, and they said that I'm having a medication-induced tremor, and this is what happens. And I thought, oh my, are you kidding me? I'm about to go on television, and I don't even have my normal voice. So anyway, I'm self-conscious because this thing happens, and I can't control it. at any rate, we wrote this book about that, and now I have to go everywhere talking about it with half my voice. So she wanted to address the mixed feelings that she had as a child, putting herself out there. And we thought if there was this physical embodiment of being seen, where when the mouse feels so, loves what she's doing so much that she gets bigger and bigger and bigger and sort of manifests this emotional state with her physical state, she then is also more seen and more heard, and that makes her more vulnerable. And so we put that on the table for kids to kind of deal with and see. And it's kind of...
And made them mice.
And made them mice, because mice have very complicated emotional lives, apparently.
And made them sort of brownish mice, so they could be either like, they have like very curly hair, so they could have Jufros, but it also could be black and brown. Little girls could see themselves. It was very important to me that, you know, because we're using animals, which is easier. So I'm just thinking, like, you guys probably just had this really in-depth conversation, and we're just sitting here talking about mice with Jufros. But
we were all World War II, but it's fine.
Yes.
We can pivot, you know.
Well,
anyway,
this
that's
mouse,
that's loud mouse.
for the most part, that's like, oh no, so she has this little, so she's little, she gets really big because her heart gets so full and full of joy when she's doing what she loves, which is the other thing that I really wanted kids to understand, is sort of how to celebrate doing that thing that you love. And then we have another book coming out after called Proud Mouse, which focuses on sort of the younger sister and growing up in the shadow and all that entails. And there's a refrain in it, so we sing, because why wouldn't she sing if she's, why wouldn't it have a refrain, which Cara really likes the idea of, because in all the great children's books, she thinks the refrain and the repetition of that is really important, especially if kids don't read yet, yes?
Yeah, just in terms of reading engagement, keeps them feeling connected and like they're readers, which they are.
And she uses her tail as her microphone. That's the best part of it.
So is it the same song or it's a different song?
It's the same refrain, with my tail in my hand and my whiskers out.
You can sing, it's fine.
With my tail in my hand, my whiskers out proud, I sing it big, I sing it la 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 loud. But then Cara said, don't make it so hard. And she said, but don't make it so hard that all of us as parents are going to be intimidated to sing with our children. So that's my version, but you can make it whatever you want. And then I wrote a whole song that incorporates that melody, and that's probably what you and your daughter were talking about, right?
Yeah, she was singing in Loud Mouse. But
when we read the book to children, we realized that we have to ask them to be quiet, even though we're reading about a loud mouse and we're encouraging them to be loud. But so we do the refrain and they get la 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 loud, really loud. And
then they get really fidgety and then they're not listening,
and
like
then we
a whole
have to be
school.
like, okay, shh, you know, which is not the, you know, the premise of the book. So we realized it was a bit of a challenge there in practice.
I feel like part of the message of your whole book is getting over your fears, and whatever they are, if it's singing loud, if it's writing, if it's speaking with a wobbly voice, or whatever it is you have to do, how you have to just force your way through it. So aside from reading books like yours, which are very encouraging, how else can grown-ups and kids find that sort of inner courage to get over whatever's scaring them? What do you think?
Well, that's what's funny about it. I feel like in every project I'm associated with, a lot like Wicked or Frozen are so often directed or connect with a young audience, but for me they're always these sort of reinforcements of what I need to learn still at the age of 51, which is, you know, don't forget, like, embrace your power. It's okay, you know, step into that light, do your thing, don't withhold your gifts from the world because I'm afraid of what scrutiny will, you know, what people will say about me. And also as women, like being loud, you know, what does that mean for us, and how are we sort of called abrasive and made to feel like we are too much in a room. So is that answering your question, kind
Sure.
of?
It's good enough.
In 1939, the mouse.
Did you ever feel afraid to share your voice?
Me? Yeah, all the time. Which, that's the other thing, is I think if you are known, or I'll just speak for myself, being known for having a large voice that's known to sing acrobatic notes, and I lost my train of thought, it's just that, yeah, I just always feel like I'm always looking for my inner voice, and people take for granted that just because we're performers and we're on stage, that's an outlet for us. And it's commendable because we take risks and we put ourselves out there. But I'm sure, as you can see with a lot of artists, we can be introverted in our own lives. So I find that to be all the time. And now, even exponentially worse, being a mother and trying to mirror the kind of person I want my son to see, and just having it all thrown back in my face.
I wanted to say, do we have oh, sorry, you're being cued.
We're going to open it up for questions, so start thinking in a minute.
I just wanted to say, you asked about strategies sort of for overcoming fears. Was that the question you had earlier? For me, writing is that strategy, in part because I think we get caught up in our own narratives and we forget to see things anew. And so a lot of times that fear is based on things that are outdated or aren't even current anymore in our experience, but we're so used to thinking of them a certain way. And for me, when I write, and not even necessarily for an audience, but just for myself, when I write, it's so easy to see when I'm, can I say bullshitting? Bullshitting myself on the page. We are promoting a children's book, so we're always worried about, but it's easy for me to see when the truth is looking back at me and when it's not, and then I can update my narratives, and oftentimes that means I'm not as afraid of something as I thought I was. So writing for me is the process that helps me, you know, overcome fears, I think.
Love that. So we'll open it up for questions for a few minutes, and then we're all going to go downstairs, and there's some really fun surprises and treats and signings and fun. So budget time for that before you run out. Does anybody have any questions? There are 2 microphones, and you can run up here, or you can just shout, or whatever.
You could come up to the microphone so people online could also hear us.
Oh, sorry. You can't just shout. Go up to the microphones if you have a question.
You could use the microphone on either side.
Go ahead. Oh, okay.
Oh, you're good.
Anybody, come on up.
My question is, what was your guys' favorite book or book series when you were kids?
Great question. Yes.
Yes. You can
So cute.
She doesn't need the book.
I'm like, I don't even know.
She's fine.
Or a microphone, for that matter.
Whenever you're no idea. You want me to go?
Favorite book series?
I'll go.
Yep, you have it? Yeah.
So hands down, I would say my spirit animal is Nancy Drew. I had all 56 original Nancy Drews, and even now on my nightstand that never leave are 2 vintage copies. So she's really my guiding light on how to write suspense.
I love Judy Blume, but I also feel like my parents were divorced when I was 2, so I had a lot of like self-help, Dan Millman, Shirley MacLaine, Out on a Limb. A lot of like Jonathan Livingston Seagull was happening for me at maybe too young of an age.
Go ahead, Cara.
She's going to take mine.
No, well, she took Judy Blume, so it's Jenny's fault. I liked all those shoe books. Does anybody remember like ballet shoes and like tap shoes or whatever it was? It's Knowles. Yes, I don't never know how to pronounce his last name, but I can see it in my head. Thank you. Yes, I loved those books. I don't even remember that much what they were about. I just remember connecting with them in a personal way. Like we just vibed. Yeah.
I think Charlotte's Web is one for me. And then when I started getting ahead of myself, it was Jackie Collins' books.
Love it.
I prefer Judith Krantz, I have to say. They were also in my mom's living room.
Yeah.
I also love The Very Young Dancer, Very Young Skater, all the Jill Krementz books. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you for doing this. I think you can tell the audience is enthralled. There was an article recently that came out about what's happening to our society, that there's so much information coming at us. It was just this week. There's so much information coming at us all the time that we have just learned to quickly scroll through everything, and that no one's really taking the time anymore to sit and read, and how that impacts our actual brain development by missing out on that. And I was wondering, as authors, how do you take a stand about it or educate people about what's lost in our quick world of scrolling through texts and emails and videos?
I started a podcast called Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. I think you have to continually remind people, this is not really for me, but I've started this whole company around this because there is nothing like reading. It's just totally immersive. Your empathy level goes up so much. I mean, I don't have to say this to a room full of people here listening to authors, but I think the more people who love to read can help proselytize and preach how much they love reading, I think it helps, just like word of mouth about a particular book. I think we have to just not give up on it. It's not something we can give up on. It's too important.
I always say that I write books for girls who don't like to read because I want to capture them at the beginning. I want to like get them, hook them, and then they have to keep going. So I feel like I try to write with that type of reader in mind.
I like it.
But, you know, I haven't tried World War II yet.
No, I mean, I actually, it's interesting that you were saying that because I feel like during COVID, a lot of people actually went back to books and, you know, obviously Netflix and all the shows, but I felt, you know, that people were really reading, but it was mostly to escape, you know, that type of thing. So, you know, I just feel like it's not something that's ever going to die. I mean, maybe, you know, you see, you know, wearing my journalist hat, you see newspapers and magazines becoming thinner. So that we have to combat. But I think with podcasts, as you're saying, that has really helped the situation. But I think books are here to stay. I mean, I'm hoping that's the situation. So,
what do you think?
I was going to say, it made me think for a second about when I was a single mom on Match.com, and I always thought, this is teaching me how to be more discriminate, because I have to go through all these profiles, and there's just this deluge of people, and then I can become more discriminate at finding the right person. And there was part of me that hoped that with all this content overload, that people would become more discriminate about what they read. And of course, that's not true of most people, unfortunately. But that was sort of what I hoped, and I hope is true.
Were you trying to
some.
find someone, a date that was reading a lot?
I was hoping to find a reader. No, and in fact, it was a very easy way to rule people out was, you know, profiles that had people who had typos and edits. It was like, you know. It was okay if they made a mistake in their email. I decided that was okay with me, but on a profile, that should be proofed, and if there was an error there, that's not okay. Yeah, just in case you wanted a tip on that. I did meet my husband on Match.com, and he's very literate. What was the question? I did have an answer. Oh, about all the content. For me, reading is always about connection. And I know you probably addressed this when we weren't here, so I don't want to be redundant, but I'm reading Solito by Javier Zamora right now. We got to meet him the other night. And being able to experience somebody else's experience is so profound and eye-opening, and I think sometimes it's like exercise where you're like, oh, I don't want to do it, but then you do it and you love it, and I feel like reading sometimes is like that. You're like, oh, I'd rather just binge watch whatever on Netflix, but then you take out your book and you're like, phew, this is what I really needed. I hope this just made sense, but that's my experience with reading, is that you get to have, sorry, give me one sec. You get, totally lost my train of thought. Anyway.
That's your experience with reading, that you get to immerse yourself.
You're so lost in reading that you lose your train of thought.
Yes.
It makes perfect sense.
But it's all about empathy, which you mentioned, and I love that.
It's funny that you say that and that she's losing her train of thought, because I'll be completely honest. Having studied, I'm going to move a little bit away from the content thing and then come back to it, so remind me. But having studied theater at NYU, you get really myopic when you decide to major and that kind of thing at school. And I actually, whenever kids come up to me and ask me for advice, I always say, go to school, and you don't necessarily have to learn theater. Go learn about life, go take English lit or whatever, my dad always used to say, take a business class because it's a hard industry and you never know what's going to happen. So I don't tell people necessarily to take business, but that would have been good too, because I don't understand the stock market. But so I just always feel like I have a little bit of anxiety about how much I know, how well-read I am, how educated I am, because I feel almost like I spent so much time learning how to find my process and craft in acting and singing that I left that. And I would have been a better writer, better lyricist, a better artist. So I contend with that a lot. And now especially because I feel like I don't know how to prioritize. I want to be really up on my current events, especially with this insecurity. So now it's like, let me consume. What do I know? I have to speak in front of all these people, make them think I'm really smart. How do I read my New York Times and all the papers, and then get my book, and then read all the scripts and all the, memorize my audition. I do have to audition still all the time. And so it's a lot. And then when I went on vacation, I just said, I'm just bringing things that I want to bring, and it was just so good to sit there and just read for the sake of reading.
Okay, last question? Yes, last question.
So much pressure. Thank you so much. You're all so eloquent and inspiring. And I guess my question was, I feel like, if I can call you on your first name, Lisa and Cara come from a place of being writers first and foremost, and Jenny too, you were a writer, but I feel like Idina and Jenny, like before the book, the object was out there, you were famous. You had already had a brush with fame through other medium. And I feel like the book as a medium still, all of my authors have imposter syndrome and fear of exposure, right? And it links to your book about finding your voice and putting yourself out there and what it does. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit, maybe there'll be two different takes, maybe there won't be, to this fear when you get your book for the first time and you do write in the hope that others are going to respond to it, but at the same time, the is getting real and people are actually going to be there and you're going to feel judged. So I could, if you could speak in the writing process of the dissonance almost between the desire to be seen and heard and the fear of the vulnerability that comes from people knowing how your inner brain and your inner thoughts are working. And maybe again, it will come from two different, slightly different places where Lisa and Cara, if I say so, came some from the obscure part, and Jenny and Idina from a more place of being in the spotlight already.
Well, with my first book, I wasn't necessarily in the spotlight already. I was like consistently, like I was, oh God. I was married to a famous guy, right? And I was an actress, but I was, just working not enough. I was almost like, I went on Twitter because I was so frustrated always doing these arcs on shows where I'm just like some guy's girlfriend. It was just so not fulfilling. And I wanted more control over my life. And I was angry and I was pissed off and I was jealous that my husband was famous. And at 28 years old, when I felt really cute, I'd walk into a room and all anybody would do is like say, can you take my picture with Jason Biggs? And I'm like, fuck Jason Biggs. And then Jason says to me, he's like, what did I ever do to you but love you and support you and like push you forward? But I was so insecure, and especially as just like a workaholic and somebody who, I feel like I'm a Leo moon, guys, and I need to be seen and I want to be heard. And I felt so eclipsed, first by my, father, and now by this man that I married. And so when I wrote the first book, it was just basically like, I'm going to throw everything at the fucking wall and see what sticks. And so I was
We're
just
in a synagogue.
You're sorry, guys. You're right. I was only bat mitzvahed at 40. Sometimes I forget. No, but I went for it, and I just let it all hang out. And I didn't have children yet, so that was why I felt I had no consequences. Plus, my parents are both narcissists, and nobody's ever really listening anyway. So I was just like, I can say anything I want. Nobody cares. Yeah. And I think that was why I was successful in some ways. The trickier thing for me came later when I have children, and now I'm paralyzed with fear because I don't want to do anything that's going to expose them in any way or, really use them to, push my career forward. I only exploit their lunches, guys.
Yeah, but they are you, so
yeah.
That restricts you in your
writing. Oh, it's so hard.
It's
Because
like,
I could write the shit out of them. They're so funny.
How about when you have an ex-husband and you really want to write a great song, and then you just,
my God.
It's like, do I really owe him that? He is the father of my son, and I was married to a famous person as well, and went through all that when my career was kind of like that. So I'm with you on that.
Married to a famous person support group over here at the Streicker Center. We are here for you no matter what your issues.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the thing that does stand out to me is I think of, I write memoir first and foremost, and in some ways Loudmouse is memoir, but my first book was pure memoir. And for me, that's a huge risk because you're the protagonist, and if people don't like the protagonist, they don't like you, right? So it's like, and yet the only way to write memoir well is to not worry about that and to be as raw and honest on the page as you possibly can. And then, so that's always been the hardest part for me. And then I had my children young. I was 23 when I had my first child. So I've been writing memoir about my kids and then having to go back and say, well, I can't say that, whether I can't say that about their dad or I can't say that about them. So how am I going to convey these stories and be respectful of the people?
How do these comedians get away with it?
Yeah.
They get on stage and they rip apart their families, then they go for Thanksgiving or whatever.
And everything's fine.
How do they do that? I say one weird thing about my mom and she can't let it go forever.
My mom, I'd go off on my mom, and I have to say my mom loves it when she meets people. She's like, don't believe everything you hear. She loves it. She's like, I'm the coolest person in all of these stories. Like she doesn't see the, her shortcomings.
You know, it's just so interesting. I was just thinking, and maybe this is free associating here, Stephanie, I think that's like an excellent question, because I think a lot of writers have this imposter syndrome where, you know, they write something and they think, oh my God, I suck, this sucks. Like, how is this ever going to happen? And you're somehow going to be exposed. But I think it goes to this deeper message as women, and I think you said it as well, that somehow, somewhere along the line, we got this message like, you are not enough. You're not enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not talented enough. You don't sing well enough. You don't, you know, you're not skinny enough. All these terrible messages. And somehow, you know, then you become moms and you think to yourself, oh my God, I do not want my girls, I have 3 daughters, to have those messages. So you go overboard to say, you know, you are enough, you are this, you are that. And while you're still a work in progress. You know, so it's just an interesting situation that goes on. It's almost like, you know, do as I say, not as I do, or whatever.
But we see that as kids. Like, we always talk about my mom just being this gorgeous woman. She's, till this day, she looks so young. She's got like abs for days, and 75 years old. And but she'd always look in the mirror and, sorry God, she'd be like, my ass is fat or whatever. And so, but she'd tell us we were beautiful all the time. But then we grew up with all these insecurities because we watched a beautiful woman look in the mirror and say that about herself.
Yeah, no, I mean, it goes back to, I remember our back refrigerator was floor to ceiling with tab, only tab. Okay, floor to ceiling. That was it, you know, a tab. But it is really interesting. I mean, you know, just women who have accomplished so much, there's still so much of this self-doubt that happens even when you've hit those high notes, so to speak. And, you know, so it's just something we have to work on as women to be more accepting. Like, we accept everything with our kids, but so hard on ourselves. You know, it really is.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
To that? I think that the trickiest part for me, and some of the questions I think you covered earlier had to do with fear and success and things like that. And mine goes back to what you're saying, which is that I feel like not being enough is this cultural message that's just been ingrained, but almost to make matters worse, you very easily become too much. So you just, there's just such a fine line between being enough and not being too much as a woman. And for me, it's so much safer to be the kind, nurturing, stereotypical woman. That's where my confidence comes from. And the minute I try to be assertive or stronger or whatever that is, I venture into this territory of, is that going to undermine this other thing that I'm good at? Is that going to undermine the kindness? Is that the gentleness? Am I going to be too much? And as if those things are at odds and can't both exist at the same time, which of course is not true. But
we have a quote on this stack of books at our house, and it says, "You may be too much for some people. Those are not your people." So let me leave you all with that.
Thank you very much. That was a really, really wonderful conversation to listen to. Now, everybody here is invited in the lobby downstairs. We have snacks and a hot chocolate bar and really fun things that we want to surprise all of them with. And please bring your books. They'll be signing.
Thank you. Thank you, Zibby.
Thank you, Zibby.